Welcome, everybody. Happy to see you all here. Thank you for taking the time to come and to learn about what I think is a very important topic, which is the conflict in Palestine. May 16 will be the 76th year of the displacement of Palestinians, what the Palestinians call the Nakba. And there's a new Nakba that has been started in Gaza, where 2.3 million Palestinians are being displaced and slaughtered as we speak. I'm going to introduce our speakers in a second, but I'd first like to take a moment to acknowledge that we're standing on the unceded land of the Kumeyaay Nation, and that wherever we are on this continent, we are humble and grateful guests on the land of sovereign Native nations. So our speakers today are going to talk about colonial and collective trauma in Palestine. They're both psychologists, but before I introduce them, I also want to give a little plug for next week's event. This is, for those of you that are joining us for the first time, this teach-in started in November 2023, and it's been going on during the entire spring semester. I lost count, but I think this is our 10th event, maybe 11th event of the year, and there's going to be more coming. So the next week in Manchester Auditorium, 3 scholars will be discussing the idea of just war theory, and exploring this concept of, is the idea of just war an oxymoron? We'll have 3 wonderful, brilliant, thoughtful scholars, 2 from our theology department, 1 a reverend from a local community, and I hope that you will be able to join us next Thursday in Manchester Auditorium, just across the road on campus. So I want to take a moment to introduce our speakers. Let me change screens. And also one more thing about if anybody is not on the mailing list and you want to get on the mailing list, you can either send me an email directly, jhalaka@sandiego.edu, or you can send an email to the Gaza USD email, which is Gaza Teach-in, teachinsandiego.edu. And I'd be happy to put you on the email list. So I want to introduce our 2 speakers. The first speaker tonight, and I'm going to introduce them both, and then Marwan will go first. The first speaker tonight is Dr. Marwan Diab, who works in the area of mental health and psychosocial support in different war zones and in different contexts of political oppression. He's currently a research fellow at the Department of Psychology of Stellenbosch University in South Africa. Dr. Diab was born and raised in Gaza, and he worked for a number of years at the Gaza Community Mental Health Center. And that's actually when I met him in 2005 in Gaza. He was instrumental at coordinating invitation for 3 American artists to travel to Gaza, to actually enter Gaza, because the Israelis make it really difficult for people to enter Gaza and work with a team of local artists in the city of Rafah in southern Gaza on a large mural. And I have no idea if that mural is still standing, Marwan. I'm not going to introduce, he asked me not to even talk about his academic background, but he will discuss what he does as a psychologist. Our other guest is Dr. Guido Veronese, and I'm probably mispronouncing it. Apologies, Guido. Guido is an associate professor in the Department of Human Sciences and Education at the University of Milano-Bicocca, and I'm probably mispronouncing that as well. He's a visiting research fellow at Stellenbosch University, Department of Psychology, and is the coordinator of Health, Conflict, and Psychology Lab. Dr. Veronese undertakes the main part of his research, clinical training, and activity in conditions of political violence and war, including Israel and Palestine, Iraq and Kurdistan, Niger and Africa, where he has practiced as principal investigator in a number of funded projects in cooperation with international non-government organizations and government bodies. He's joining us right now from Northern Australia, where he's working with indigenous communities there. So I want to welcome you both and very much looking forward to their presentation. Then we'll have a bit of a discussion, then we'll open it up to questions. My colleague Diane Healing is going to pass around papers, so anybody want to present a question, you're going to write it down, and I will read them to our panelists, and they'll be happy to respond. Marwan is going to go first, and I'm going to stay here because Zoom is touchy, and I'm going to try to keep the controls working. Marwan, you're on.
Yeah. Can you see me? Can you see my screen?
See your presentation.
Okay, and okay, thank you very much for giving me the chance to talk. My name is Marwan Diab. As you can see in my screen, I was born in Gaza Strip, and I am originally from Masmiya, which is the land of my father in 1948. First of all, I would like to thank John for this introduction, and I would like to thank San Diego University for hosting me and my mentor, Dr. Guido Veronese. He is my mentor and my trainer and my co-researcher, so I'm very proud to be part of this panel with him. And also would like to thank the University of San Diego as well, because I was at the University of San Diego in 2006, I believe, if my memory served me, and I visited John at the time in the university in the art show that you have at university, which was fabulous. Okay, I'll just start with, I just need to move this here a bit aside. The word Nakba, I need to move all these tabs just as, so Nakba is in Arabic it's called Nakba, which means a disaster or a catastrophe. This was happening in 1948, where we had lots of destruction, massacres, and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of our parents and grandparents at the time. The Nakba, it's tragic and devastating for hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who were forcibly displaced in different villages, and they were destroying them at the time. It was ruined and at the expense of the creation of what's called Israel. The continuous Israeli invasion and violation of Palestine reveals that what took place and it did not end at that year. So it happened in 1948. However, for us Palestinians, we don't think this has finished, because the Nakba continues to be living with us throughout the generations. Around 7 people are living in different camps in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and the Gaza Strip, West Bank as well. We remain jammed in camps, suffering poverty, unemployment, infrastructure decay. And the narrative is the longest stories of dispossession, occupation, and refuge. And since the Nakba, Palestinians have not been able to return to their lands to establish a sovereign state, and most importantly, have not been able to put closure to the narrative. So, as I said, the narrative is still open, and our wounds are still open, because the Nakba it's still part of our history and still part of our present. Transgenerational trauma is it's the passing down of the trauma, pain, and the suffering from one generation to another. It is collective trauma, which has caused a range of events such as war, displacement, and oppression. Trauma can be passed through generation by re-experiencing the traumatic events and passing on stories, beliefs, and ways of being. So this has been re-experienced even though you were not physically present there. It can manifest in physical, psychological symptoms such as depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and can have long-term and short-term effects on individuals and the community. And transgenerational trauma can be passed down through families, communities, societies, and can profoundly impact individuals and the relationships. Edward Said, the Palestinian scholar, said no individual should face the threat of displacement from their residence or territory. No individual should experience discrimination based on their religious affiliation, and no individual should be deprived of their land, national identity, cultural heritage, irrespective of the circumstances. And he also emphasized the importance of writing down and recording the voices of Palestinian refugees, which serve as cues in preserving the Palestinian memory. And in fact, I have personally been documenting recordings of my mother, who's 92 years old now, and my uncle, who's over 82 years as well. And I have videos, but unfortunately, there might not be a chance for us to present it because they're about 20 minutes long. And they talk about when they were raised in there and what has happened with them, and it's in Arabic. Intergenerational transmission of memory through spontaneous telling. So they just tell you the stories, retelling the stories to the children and grandchildren. PTSD and the depression significantly exceed those. So in general, in the Palestinian context, you find the PTSD is quite high. However, if we were to look from a pathologizing perspective, this is just a tip of the iceberg below, because it's a wide social suffering related to occupation, blockade, violence, ethnic cleansing, land theft, daily humiliation, loss of faith in local and global leadership to resolve. So if we were to look at the pathologizing and having some diagnostic disorders, or it might look as if it's a PTSD, but in fact, our reality is much more deeper than the individual diagnosis or classification of people. So it's more of a community suffering or community trauma rather than it's just individual cases who are having mental health problems. If we look at the stages of grief, we start with the denial, that this is something that has not happened, and then we became angry, and then we bargain, and then down we might have some depressive thoughts or depressive symptoms, and then we'll end up with acceptance, temporary acceptance, but not complete acceptance, of course. And now there are efforts from to stop community as a whole from steadfasting. Of course, the efforts are by the international communities who are against Palestinians, and the aim is to destroy the infrastructure and not leave memories behind, to make the places a memory to avoid. At the current stage, we are in a confusion phase, not sure what to do. We are resettling, searching for safety and security for basic needs. We're still in the denial stage that this has happened to us. We have anger. We need to know how to deal with it. We stopped the denial and bargaining stage. Some people will still have bargaining. Should we stay or should we go? I'm talking about the current circumstances now in the Gaza Strip. And if this persists, the depression stage might take place, and the struggle steadfastness will continue. John, am I going too fast, or it's okay?
As far as I'm concerned, you're doing okay.
Okay, yeah, okay, no problem. I just want to make sure that I cover some of my slides, and okay, no problem. The processing of the problem was not supported, so there was not enough processing of the trauma. Healing is impeded and interrupted. It was interrupted because of the frequent traumas that are happening. There is no time for healing. There is no time for grief. So this was interrupted. As far as the 2023 or 2024 and still going on, we have photos now. People see it differently. The healing context is different. People see it, and the whole globe is seeing what's happening in the Gaza Strip. They see it from a humanitarian point of view. They see the facts. Okay, the South African move of the court gives evidence of the Palestinian narrative of the oppression. So in general, we don't forget. we don't refrain from searching for the facts. So if our grandparents did not look for the facts because of lack of access to information, and even our parents did not have the chance to search for the facts, this generation is searching for the facts, the third generation after what's happening. And we're still in the unresolved grief. The unresolved grief did not stop Palestinians from reshaping their lives, moving on to survival. The survivors of the 1948, they moved on with their lives. They moved on temporarily, but at the personal level, some of them talked while others did not talk. So I think it's part of the trauma in a way or another. Some people refrain from talking because talking about the trauma was really sad and depressing for our grandparents or even our parents who left. When I traveled through Jerusalem, which I did in 2023, I felt the pain of my parents. I looked as soon as I was in Masmiya, which is, as you can see in my screen, I looked and I spontaneously started taking photos and shared with my mother and family. Said I was close to our homeland in Masmiya. So it's always in our minds, whether we think about it or we don't think about it. And for us, in general, coping is something that happens while our bodies are still under threat. Healing can happen after the threat has happened. For us as Palestinians, we are coping, but we are not healed yet. So because we will be healed once the threat is gone. And unfortunately, the threat is still going on. The threat is going on until now in Gaza Strip, in West Bank, in different parts of Palestine. So we will not be healed completely. We are coping. We are adjusting to the current circumstances just to live and to go on with our lives. In 2023, it's a chance to express painful memory. It was a chance for the generation to understand more. Now, the new generation has, in the past, we were blaming our parents for the 1948, we call it defeat and escaping. They were accused of not steadfasting. They left the land with little resistance. That's our perception, and that's what we thought. Now it's clearer for this generation, the third generation, and we understand that 1948 was forced displacement, was out of fear and horror. It was a survival matter. And this is really an important, it's actually one of my videos, John. I'm not sure if you wish to play one of them. Have you downloaded them, John, or can I try to start one of them from here?
I think if you can start it from your computer.
Okay, so let's see. I'll try to have one of them here. Oops. Just quickly. Right here. Yeah. I stopped sharing, so I should be able to play this one. Yeah, so if I want to share again, is this something? I don't think it's gonna work here. You see it? Not yet. Okay, share screen again, share, and yes, share sound. There it is. Okay, where are we? The video, yeah. Can you see the video?
Click play when you.
Okay. Yeah.
موكب الرئيس هنا، هاي بنس، هاي سليمان، وهاي مروان، وهاي سفيان.
Okay, so oops, I'll stop this. Okay, stop. I want to stop sharing. I guess is it still in the sharing mode? This
Shares.
stop. Yeah. Okay, so the reason I have, if you notice this video, the video was my son actually, and he was blaming me, and in front of us was my brothers, and this was when we escaped, or when we were displaced from our home in Gaza City, and we were called in the middle of the night around 2 a.m. that you should be transferring from the Gaza City to the north, to the south of Gaza City. And then he's kind of, in a way, being sarcastic and making fun of us. It's like, you guys are defeated, or you guys are escaping from this. But in fact, when you see the magnitude of the terror and the horror and the violence that we have been exposed to, as soon as they told us to leave our home from Gaza City, we left right away, unquestionable, because we have seen the destruction that has happened to other people who did not listen to the IDF instructions. So I share back my screen again. Okay, don't want to share too many screens. Okay, share again. Okay, so do you see my screen now? Okay, so I'll just put it in a better mode. Okay, there you go. Okay, so it's clear for this generation to understand that it was forced displacement, and I think as we were driving down from the north to the south, it was in the back of my mind that maybe when I see my mother or my parents, my dad passed away. When I see my mother, I will tell her that I am sorry for blaming you for escaping from 1948, because the magnitude of the violence was extremely too much to handle. This transition in 2000 transition, it was a chance to express our painful memory. It was a chance for the generation to understand more. The new generation was blaming parents and for the defeat. They were accused of not steadfasting. They left the land. Now it's clear for the generation to understand that it was a forced. Okay, we experienced the same thing. We did the same. I just talked about it in my without. So we received the SMS in the middle of the night saying that we should leave. We did the same. We escaped death. We felt the pain of our parents and grandparents. We justified their escape. People were crying as they were leaving their homes. We recalled our parents' pain. We were looking for safety. We had the problem of survival guilt. We left other people behind us. There are lots of people who are still there. So it was really difficult for us to leave some other relatives who did not dare to leave because their circumstances did not allow them to do so. People started to have more hope. They start to go back to their home villages. They wanted to see, yeah. So in 2003, when the October 7 happened, we have, okay, from our perspective as Palestinians, we had the hope that, okay, we're going to go back to our home villages. We're going to go back to Masmiya. We're going to go back to the stolen land that it was a form of healing that, okay, we're almost wanting to go back to. So, but if you look at from the Western media, they have seen it in a different way. So I think the context, you have to be in the context to understand what's happening. People escape death. They left their belongings behind them in Gaza. Huge neighborhoods were completely wiped out. Displacement of people, massacres committed. The massacres are documented, brutal killings and mass destruction. This is in 2023. And in fact, I was there myself for about 37 days until I evacuated with my son. The intensity this time is much more. It was beyond our expectation and beyond our belief. Information was transferred immediately through witnessing, through different media sources. It's participating with the whole world on a daily basis. So as soon as something happens, we send to our friends, look what's happening to us. And we have lots of people who are supportive to our cause from different parts of the world, and especially from the United States. We have lots of people who are extremely supportive to our cause. And I think some of them are attending with us on Zoom here. This impacts the processing of our trauma. The 2023-24, it was more atrocities that affected the generations. We think that hope is vital because until now, if you come to Gaza and ask people, do you have the keys or land documents with you? You'll have many people bringing you the documents and the keys to their homes when they left. So what the Zionists are working on, they are trying to kill the hope of going back to our land. Hope is, they have the slogan, to be defeated, kill the hope. Going back to the homeland is part of the national identity and it's our right of return. There is a distortion. There was a distortion that we cannot go back. My parents built their life. The mass killing and the trauma did not impede their lives. It's only avoidance. So they are avoiding the trauma. They don't want to re-experience the pain, the defeat, and the humiliation. And the Zionists again wanted to destroy our hope of going back to our original land in 1948, where our parents were living close to some Jewish people in the same neighborhoods. I showed this one. My son was documenting this as we are leaving. In fact, he made me go back to get his personal belongings amid the danger of destruction. The new generation wanted to know more about the history, so they were looking for more information. What has happened to our grandparents? What was the story? So they have more access to the information now, and they look for more information. Even the third generation is looking for more information about what has happened to in 1948. Such images is a provocation to the new generation. The new generation started to process what has happened retroactively. The magnitude of the trauma, massacres, genocide, and they witnessed the ethnic cleansing. The identification, it was an identification with the colonialism with Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. But the unresolved grief is different. The generations still live in the same land. There is availability to get back, and there is a hope. So we still have the hope of going back because the land is still there, and we left temporarily, so we'll go back again. Why is this stuck now? Okay, let's see. I think my screen is stuck. I might have to stop sharing and go back again. Okay. Yeah. Okay, here. How am I doing for time, John?
We've got maybe another 5 minutes or so.
5 minutes? Okay, well, okay. So let me see. The first generation, of course, they have experienced 1967 as well, first intifada, second intifada. So the generation has been going through all these wars, violence, whatever you name it. So, and the generation suffered displacement, slept in emergency shelters in 2009, 2014, and 2023. Just want to go to like what does it mean to have a trauma? Trauma refers to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or community violence, either through direct experience or witnessing it or learning that it has happened. So this is what has been happening to us. We have learned about it from our family members. So therefore we still could suffer the trauma. And PTSD is a psychological, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, psychological reaction that happens among some other some other people after experiencing traumatic event. The main group of symptoms which characterize are re-experiencing the trauma, avoidance, numbing, and hyperarousal. In the Palestinian context, I believe that the avoidance aspect is almost non-existing, or maybe Guido, with your expertise, please, if there's a chance to comment on this, because as soon as when you avoid the trauma, what happens, you avoid the places, you avoid the smell of the things, and you avoid the taste of different things. And so for Palestinians, as soon as something happens near their houses or something, everybody rushes to the sea to go and help, not avoid the situation. So I think this needs to be taken into consideration, that there is no avoidance, I believe, in the Palestinian context. I'll pass some of these because you gave me 5 minutes warning. So, okay. Okay. Yes, one other thing is, like as Sehwel in 2005 says, that it's a continual disorder. Palestinian people are actually living in the what we call ongoing stress, traumatic stress disorder, not PTSD. So there is no post in our context. The word post should not be existing, because we are living in OTSD, which is ongoing traumatic stress disorder, rather than post-traumatic stress, because the trauma still continues until our days. Okay. Yes. Yes, I have some testimonies, but I'm not gonna go through them. In here, the children of the first generation have been raised in different parts of Palestine and the whole group. Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna mention these ones since my time is running, but yeah, the Great March of Return. I personally have interviewed some people who have been in the Great March of Return. It was also another way of having hope for the people of going back to their 1948 land. So it was a community participation as well. This was happening in 2018. And Guido and I interviewed at the time some people who talked about why are they participating, and they have been injured and re-injured and re-injured, and they persisted to participate in the Great March of Return, thinking that they will be able to go back to their homeland. And when we see everywhere in slogans of the right of return, it's a red line that we cannot overpass. They are everywhere in different, people are calling for right of return demonstrations. We see some photos, they are spread through marches and different things. And occupation, settlement, apartheid wall, and arrest equals Palestine ongoing Nakba. So all these atrocities that are happening, they are reminders for us, they keep reminding us of our Nakba in 1948. This was me during the war in 2023. This was October 15, 2023, when the house I was refuge had refuge in Rafah, supposed to be a safe area. It was destruction. It was destroyed because there was a neighboring school that was hit, and we almost died, myself and my son in this incident. I was not driving, but I drove the car afterwards. So because this is the car, as you can see it on the left picture. This is my son. Out of all this, all he was concerned about is his Nike shoes. He wanted to get them out of the rubble, and people are screaming and stuff, but he wanted to get his shoes. And this is a photo that was drawn recently by some people who are just saying, where should we go? There is no place to go because there are massacres and mass destruction everywhere, and there is no safe place in Gaza. We were told that if you move to the south of Gaza, you will be safe. However, I think as you have seen quite well, there is no safe place in Gaza. Everywhere there is destruction, and there's lots of threats in the middle of Gaza, lots of threats in the Rafah area, and everywhere. So there is no safe place. So people are saying, where should we go? And of course, now we think that 2023, same as the 1948. It's the same story with more intensity and more destruction that is happening to our generation in this time. This is an interesting This person was he's a nephew, my nephew, and he was injured slightly in the destruction that took place in Rafah. But despite this, he still holds on to his nice beard, and he took him to the hospital when he was treated for slight injuries. I think I want to stop here. My 5 minutes were up about 5 minutes ago. So, so that's all for. I'm ready for questions, and thank you for giving me the chance. And I hope this was clear. And I try to rush as much information as I can, but I have lots of things to talk about. So I'm ready for any questions that people might have. Thank you, John, and thank you everyone for listening.
There'll be a bit, not a bit, there'll be a good chunk of time for you to discuss some of the things you want to discuss during the conversation. And I'm sure some of the questions from the audience will prompt you to speak of the things that you didn't get to address. Guido, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I'm gonna try to share my slides in just a second. Okay. Here we go. So once again, thank you, John, and thank you to the University of San Diego for having me, and thank you to Marwan that was the ones at first inviting and telling that he was happy to share his experience and his knowledge even in such an event. I don't recognize myself as your mentor, Marwan. Just I feel we are very close friends. We did many things together in terms of research, in terms of clinics, in terms of work together in Gaza. And let me say just that I gain much more of my knowledge, of my skills, working close to you, to people such as the ones at the Gaza Community Mental Health Program that I recognize are really beautiful and impressive scholars and practitioners. When I'm invited to talk in such an event since the beginning of this massacre, let me say, I have quite an hard time in talking and in expressing my idea and my thoughts because of what is happening to my friends in Gaza. And what I want to do now is just before starting my presentation to dedicate this speech to the friends, the students, the brothers and sisters that I lost during these 6 months of horrible war in Gaza. So let me acknowledge the beautiful work of Shaher Yaji, who was one of the closer friends and the collaborators in my research, and who died with his 4th son under the rubble of his home. And then my beautiful students, such as Lamia Nasser or Nishrin Jarada, or Maizara Al-Rayes, who was killed under his house again, under horrible bombing, and his 2 brothers that were killed them too when they tried to rescue them from the rubble. And finally, Malik Jarada, the son of one of my closest friends, Ala Jarada, psychologist working in the Gaza Strip, and who is one of my closest brothers there. Let me start trying to create a connection to what Marwan said in his presentation. When we are talking about the Palestinian suffering and, of course, of the Gaza suffering, using individualistic labels or individualistic perspectives such as the one of the post-traumatic stress disorder is not sufficient to fully grasp and understand the real psychological suffering in the Gaza Strip. In fact, the Palestinian condition is a condition that is involving the whole population. There is no one that is excluded by this sense of continuous and ongoing suffering. The Palestinian suffering is a social one. We cannot reason in terms of individual categories. And this is something that all of the population are living in war and experiencing genocide have to deal with. In fact, the technologies of power are trying to produce and to inflict pain to the population in a way to create and to produce obedient and docile bodies. Starting from this consideration, everybody is involved in the suffering that is related to war and genocide. We cannot overlap this idea of suffering with the idea of madness. The problem is not a problem that is involving the brain. This is not a problem that is involving just the brain and the body of the people, but this is something that is involving the entire Palestinian society. In fact, the Palestinian suffering is not just related to the trauma reactions, but this is related to the traumatic reality they are living in. Everything in their lives, in the Palestinian lives, are reminding that they do not have a control. They are living in a continuous sense of uncertainty and ambiguity because of the continuous pressures by the colonizing occupation. So the fact that the brutal force that is in a way shaping the Palestinian lives is making them living in a continuous sense of ambiguity, uncertainty, human insecurity, a sense of loss of dignity, and a continuous feeling of humiliation. As Marwan well stated before, we cannot think of the Palestinian suffering such as something that can be referred to the post-traumatic stress disorder label. In fact, there is no post. The Palestinian people, the Gaza people, are living since the 1948 a continuous experience of trauma. As I stated now, I think we can talk much more about traumatic realities rather than punctual and isolated episodes of traumas. People are referring of feelings to be broken inside, to be destroyed, to be continuously humiliated as a result of a continuous experience of humiliation and dispossession. So the people, when we talk about the suffering itself and this continuous trauma, we have to take into consideration that people are continuously trying to adjust between the sense of ease and disease. The fact to feel well and the fact suddenly to get in a condition that can be related to psychological burden is due to political and human rights related violation of human rights related episodes. What the Palestinian people are trying to do is to normalize a reality that we can consider as abnormal, and their way is to continuously try to twist between this continuum between ease and disease. So we cannot reason in terms of post, we have to reason in terms of ongoing and continuous trauma. Again, we cannot use our individualistic categories and looking at the trauma reactions such as something that individuals are experiencing. In fact, the whole Palestinian society is continuously perceiving and living in a condition of trauma. And the structural and systematic violence against the Palestinian is undermining the social fabric and the collective abilities to resist, the so-called Palestinian Sumud. Just to give an example, killing 26,000 children, which is the 2% of the minors population in Gaza, it's a way to make the Palestinian society perpetuate a sense of collective grief and of collective trauma that is involving the entire communities. And let me quote something that Devin Attallah stated when he wants to respond to Judith Butler. Judith Butler was asking to mourning both of the Israelis and the Palestinians when the October 7th disaster started. And Attallah answered something like that. As a Palestinian, we do not have the privilege to grieve because we cannot mourn our corpse, murdered as a part of this continuous colonial violence. And again, we have to acknowledge the fact that the Palestinian social suffering is not something that started from October 7, but this is something that we have to refer to the very beginning of the colonial Zionist project in the Middle East. The violence and the sense of trauma has been transmitted as a historical and political burden from generation to generation. The individual and the collective memory of Palestinian is completely shaped by narrative of dispossession, of fear, uncertainty that are transmitted by from parents to their kids. And you can perceive such a sense of dispossession and historical and generational suffering when you look at the architecture of the occupation. The landscape has been vertically reshaped and reconstructed in a way that the Palestinian identity, in a way, can be perceived as a disrupted and unrecognized in their indigenous land. So the occupation is perceivable on the ground, and you can see walls, you can see checkpoints, you can see the completely reconstruction of entire part of the indigenous land through settlements and so on. Or the landscape, or the airspace, sorry. The airspace is totally occupied by the Israeli air forces, the drones. The sky is not anymore the sky that the indigenous population can recognize as their own sky. And the underground, of course, the exploitation of water, the exploitation of resources that are in a way disrupting the Palestinian memories. And finally, I think this definition of colonial trauma, which has been used by Kalim Al-Azali, describing the experience of collective trauma in the Algerian population after the long-lasting domination of the French colonizers. I think even this definition can fit with the Palestinian experience. In fact, the technologies of domination and colonial violence are in a way continuously and constantly controlling and survey the lives of the indigenous population, undermining their sense of security and impaying a sense of self-determination. The dispositive of domination that are fostered by the colonization wants to subjugate the bodies and the minds of the Palestinian indigenous population, eroding their agency, their sense of meaning, and their collective steadfastness, sumud. The colonial domination is implemented through the devastation of the territory and the bodies and the mind. They take into consideration the massive destruction of schools, universities, the killing of university professors, researchers, and students in a so-called scholasticide or epistemicide. And then the systematic and continuous destruction of the health system, the bombing of hospitals, medical clinics, the killing of medical doctors, and so on. And this is the clear colonial attempt to completely cancel the Palestinian social fabric. So the attempt of the colonization is to completely cancel the Palestinian memory throughout the mutilation of bodies and throughout the domination of minds. And over the time, this is creating a kind of a collective confusion and a sense of restless and confused memory. On the other side, we have to acknowledge very little continuous small act of resistance, very small act that are showing the incredible capability of the indigenous population to resist and to fight back to this huge and massive cancellation of their memory. The Palestinians are struggling for their existence, and they are shaping their resistance through patience, perseverance, and endurance, the so-called sumud. Resisting for the Palestinian is existing, and the resistance is better defined by decolonial and continuous reaction to the trauma, rather than being inflated with the Western concept of resilience that is passivizing once again the Palestinians. The Palestinians are not resilient, are resistant people. Healing in Palestine is a collective process of struggle that is trying to reconnect the fragment and the stolen generations, the families and the community in a way that is decolonizing and liberatory. Let me show this brief clip where you can see a small act of resistance. This is a demonstration, a Friday demonstration that is belonging to this struggle that Marwan mentioned before in his speech, which is the Great March of Return, where people are dancing the traditional Palestinian dance, Middle Eastern and Palestinian dance, the Dabka, together in front of the Israeli snipers, showing the fact that they are still resisting in their land, and they claim for the right of return to the dispossessed territories in the 48 land. And what is interesting in this clip I will show you now is that there is something challenging the racist narrative, Western narrative of the Palestinian society as a primitive and masculine patriarchal society. In this clip, you will see women, men, youth, and elderly dancing together, claiming their identity and restoring their memories.
الضيوف المعزين الكرام، يا مين هلا ملاك وتعاشر الغير وتنساني أنا وظريف طول ووقت أقول لك رايح على وردي وبلادك أحسن لك خايف يا ظريف تروح وتتملك وتعاشر الغير وتنساني أنا
During this dance, we can see youth, male and female, and then finally old men joining the dance and trying to resist pacifically the colonial violence by fostered by, in this case, by the Israeli snipers. To conclude, another small little thing the Palestinians were capable to produce that will make their memory as invictable and as capable to resist generation after generation, which is the poetry. We have to acknowledge beautiful and incredible minds such as the one of Ghassan Kanafani or Mahmoud Darwish that made the Palestinian struggle not just a struggle on the ground, but a struggle in the landscape of arts, in the landscape of performative arts, such as the writings and the poetry and so on. And in this case, this incredibly beautiful poetry, I think, can be the most meaningful to conclude my today's speech. If I must die, you must live to tell my story. By another beautiful friend, Rifat Alarir, an incredible and beautiful Palestinian poet who has been killed in 23 during his last horrible attack on Gaza.
If I Must Die by Rifat Alarir, November the 1st, 2023. If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings. Make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment, an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Guido. Thank you, Marwan. Let me just adjust the Zoom thing. Oh, no. I want both of them to be pinned. Let me see if I can do that from this computer. But I'm only getting one person pinned. Okay. Oops, no. Replacement. Interview mode. Top right corner. Hooray. Thank you all for your patience with our technical challenges here. And thank you, Guido, and thank you, Marwan. Diane, would you mind passing out some paper so that folks can write down questions if they have? And I kind of maybe want to begin a conversation. Can anybody hear me okay? About the actual underground trauma. I mean, and both of you have witnessed a lot and worked with a whole lot of patients from various ages about it. I was only in Gaza once, and it was a really profound experience in many ways. And one of the memories that I have of when I was working on a mural that down in Rafah, there was a bunch of artists, maybe 10 to 12 artists that worked on this project. And like in any sort of event, there were almost hourly breaks for coffee and cigarettes and discussions and unexpected arguments. But one of the things that I recall is this young man who was the brother of one of the painters. Now, I don't remember his name or the name of the painter, I have to admit. He was this young man, 14, 15 years old. And he didn't paint with us, but he was there the whole time. And he became the person that sort of ran for cigarettes, ran to buy coffee, ran to do this. And I spent a good bit of time during the breaks chatting with him. And he had this beautiful, sweet, little young boy face, kind of a young face. And I remember asking him at one point, and I felt really stupid doing this afterwards, but I remember asking him, what is your hope for the future? And his face, that sweet face, kind of turned almost rock ashen. And he looked at me dead in the eyes and he said, I don't have any hope. I'm already dead. And the very thought of that still sends shivers down my back. That lack of hope is something that is in many ways instilled in the whole population. Yet somehow they resist and persist. Can you both maybe talk a little bit about this process of figuring out how to persist in the face of continuous generational violence? And
Okay, Marwan, you want to start first?
Okay, sure. Okay. Thank you, John, for raising this question. I think it's a very important question. And if you go around, as you mentioned, in the community and ask people, what are you planning to do in a year time or something? They say, sorry, I don't have a plans for such a long time. It's too far in advance. As Guido mentioned, life is very unpredictable. Life is very ambiguous, and you plan day-to-day activities. So in terms of hope, I think we have done a study about hopelessness and the quality of life. So it seems that although people might tell you that we are living and trying to adapt to the living conditions that we are in, but in general, most teenagers or youth or people in general will not have hope, even though there is an image that, as mentioned by Guido, that people are resilient, and they keep emphasizing the word resilient, saying that Palestinians are resilient. Sometimes it's a distortion to say that they are resilient, because if you say that they're resilient, it means that you have the right, or you can abuse them more, and you can violate their rights more, and because they're resilient, So, and this is very important. But in general, I think lack of hope is very prevailing, and the only way to give people hope is to remove the occupation, to remove all the barriers around them, and to show on the ground that there are something meaningful that's happening to them in terms of lifting the siege, lifting the blockade. Otherwise, the occupation is still in their mind, and their sense of hopelessness will be prevailing. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with you, Marwan. Let me add just these small thoughts. When you enter Gaza, and this was the very first experience when I visited the city in 2009 first, and then all over my visit till 23. The things that you perceive is quite something that I never perceived anywhere in the world, kind of crystalline, pure, and incredible humanity. You feel welcomed, you feel that you are totally safe in one of the most unsafe, maybe the most unsafe place in the world. You feel loved, you feel people will care of you. So it means that the instant that you are living in are quite making you very hopeful. And I can imagine that something similar can happen for the Palestinians themselves. There's a micro act of decency, of mutual help, family connection, the fact that you can have a coffee together even after a bombing is in a way making you hopeful in the present. But of course, as John rightly said, when you talk with a Palestinian, you ask them to express their ideas about the future. They will say there is no future. So this seems quite paradoxical. From a part, you see the Palestinian resistance such as something that you can perceive as unique, never seen before in other places. But then, of course, when you enter deeper in the Palestinian collective suffering, you will see that their hopes since 48 have been cut off. Yeah. So this is quite strange to deal with, because in a way you could see people are and the society is totally affected. But when you live the present with each Palestinian individual in their lands, they are capable to transfer a huge and a unique sense of hope. And this is quite contradictory, but this is real. This is something I experienced, and in a way, I think Marwan can confirm how people can survive in a condition that it's quite unlivable.
Thank you both. Actually, just on a technical question, can you see the audience at all from your computer? All right, let me figure out. I think I can fix that. No, you're just seeing me, huh? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
See me. There was a screen earlier for just the audience for the whole setup. Never mind. Sorry, I'm gonna not mess with that. We have a question for each of you, and folks in the audience, please feel free to write your questions, and Diane will pick them up. For Dr. Diab, can you explain when you and your family left Gaza?
So this is the question?
That's the first, and then there's one for Guido.
Yes. Okay. My family left in 2019. We left Gaza, but I went back myself in 2022 and stayed there for a year until I was evacuated from Gaza in November 11th, 2023. So I was there with my son, my oldest son, the guy who was pulling his Nike shoes from the car. We were there for a year together, but the rest of my family were outside. So.
And a question for Guido. What can be done to help the children who have witnessed unspeakable violence?
Let me use the words of a friend of mine who was a writer, and he helped me a lot in readjusting my way to be a clinician and a psychologist in a situation such as the one of Gaza. he said we are political dependent. It means that if the political situation will get worse, we will be worse in our lives. If the political conditions or external conditions will increase the level of pressure, violence, and dispossession on us, we will be very, very bad. So I think the only one thing we can do to help children as well as to help everybody in Gaza is to move and leave this horrible occupation. Till the occupation will be ongoing, we cannot do, or we can do very few things to save the children.
I have a question.
John, can I also comment if you don't mind?
Yes, please.
Yes, one of my colleagues who was working with me at Gaza Community Mental Health Program, he was mentioning something about that we are dealing with children and helping them in terms of symptoms, in terms of fixing certain problems such as bedwetting maybe, or some behavioral problems here and there. However, he said it's very ironic that we are in a way violating the rights of individuals. How? He said that we are preparing the people for the second stage of violations. So this is what we're doing. So in a way, we are giving them some tranquilizers or giving them some something that they can live by. Then they are ready for the second round of violence and human rights violations again. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Marwan. And the fact is that the Palestinian and the Gaza situation is questioning very much the role of the psychology in general, not just in a condition of war and severe violation of human rights. Do we want to be agent of resocialization or readaptation to conditions that are iniquitous, are unjust at the very beginning, or do we want to be agent for social change?
We have another question. I'll read it in full. It's two parts. In discussing generational trauma and generational cycles of trauma, even in communities when the traumatic events are quote unquote over and there is quote unquote justice, the cycles of trauma continue. Once there is justice, what does hope and healing look like? And then the second part of the question, how can healing as resistance begin or look like?
I will start first this time, Marwan. Do you agree? Okay, thank you. So I think the well-being of people in general, I'm not just referring to Gaza Strip, is the possibility of self-realization, the fact that they can live a meaningful and proper life in their communities, being connected in a good and safe social environment. So I think the way of healing for Palestinians must involve the entire society. It's something that must be thought as a path for liberation, not just for individuals, communities, not just related to Gaza nowadays, which is living really in a horrible condition, but the real Palestinian healings will in a way be realized just when the Palestinian will be free, in my opinion.
Yeah, just a small comment, John. I will refer to the words of Dr. Iyad al-Sarraj, who was the head of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, where he said, I think healing will start when the oppressor comes and tells you, I am sorry for what I have done. I apologize for all the traumas that I have caused you. Then the healing process starts, and then you can sit and talk and see how you can heal. So
that's a really important point. We have another question coming up. Let me grab it. Thank you. Two questions. How can we mourn the lives lost without memorializing Palestine, viewing the land and people as already gone? And in parentheses, this is a point of view many seem to be holding online. How can we mourn the lives lost without memorializing Palestine, viewing the land and people as already gone?
Please, Mara, you first now.
Yeah, I think mourning is very difficult in Palestine, because there is no closure to the mourning, because there has been a complicated grief and unresolved grief. Many people have died without the real stage of mourning. There is not enough time of mourning. I believe it will be really difficult to mourn people, because you have to see them dying, or you have to bury them in order for you to have the process complete. However, many people are still under the rubble, and I have seen in Rafah how they are taking people out of the rubble. They're just collecting them in a bulldozer, moving them, and if they see a body, they will take it out or something. So I think mourning will take a long time. And I think in our audience, we have a specialist. She was here. I'm not sure she's still there, Jerry. She's a specialist in mourning. And I learned from her, because she works with the mothers who have lost their kids. I think so for us, I think the mourning process, it will take time. Also, things have to be quiet for a long time to mourn the death of the people. In Palestine, there has not been a time enough for people to start mourning, because they know that as soon as a wave of violence finishes, another, yeah, she's saying still here, another wave of violence comes, and the mourning process does not have its time. So I think it will be really difficult to mourn people. That's my opinion.
I think that the Palestinian mourning is not just something that is up to the Gaza people. Of course, right now they are living incredible sorrow and sense of grief. But I think, according with the magnitude of this extermination, the point is that the mourning is a global issue. I think it's something that the whole international community must deal with and must confront with. And I think a way that could help the Palestinian mourning first, but even the global mourning then, is an international solidarity, an interconnection between the different global struggle for survival, from the Aboriginal people in Australia to the First Nation in America, or the Black community in the United States, the dispossessed community in Italy, or wherever. This kind of connection, the fact that we can make at this moment people share their memories and stories and their mourning, can help the Palestinians in overcoming their sense of isolation and the sense of exclusion from the human arena. And then it will help even the Western society to deal with its, can I say that, collective psychopathology, the fact that either we deny the fact that something huge is happening there in Gaza, or we want to normalize, okay, we just think of numbers, or the fact that we want to dehumanize the Palestinians. So these are collective international mourning, the connection between different struggles, the different paths for liberation of the dispossessed communities all over the world, can help all us to process this incredible and unbearable grief.
If I may build on that, I'm going to read the questions that were presented to me, but one of the questions I wanted to ask later was about that sort of the connection. I think people that are traumatized, societies that are traumatized, often feel that they're alone, isolated, that their suffering, if not unique, their suffering is theirs and nobody knows and nobody cares. You both have worked with traumatized communities in many different parts of the world. How can scholars, scientists as yourself, but others who are activists and educators, how can those sort of, how can we penetrate those walls of isolation, inform communities in Gaza that there are others that have shared these long histories of brutality and grief and suffering and loss and slaughter? And how can we bring that? I mean, are the folks that you're dealing with in Northern Australia right now, are they aware of the suffering of the Palestinians? Are the Palestinians aware of the suffering of the Aboriginal people of Australia?
Thank you, John, for this very important question. I think answering to this question is quite difficult to us as a professional. So why? Because our models and our education led us thinking that to solve a trauma, we have to use techniques, or we have to act in a way that could help people in recovery their brain issue rather than their condition as a human being. So maybe this is a question that much better could be answered by philosopher or whoever else, activist, maybe better than a psychologist, because our models are really so narrow and incapable to answer so important issues of fragmentation and division. What is clear to me is that to help connections, we must be ally. We have to go to the communities, to the dispossessed communities. We have to listen to the stories, the memories, the narratives of the colonized indigenous population, and see if our instruments, our ways to work can be usable and useful with them. And they will ask us if they need our help, our expertise to make them moving toward the reconnection and recomposition of those fragmented identities and bodies. So I think we have a very, very weak instruments right now, and our science, our evidence-based models cannot help really in creating collective ways of healing. On the other side, I think we can be good allies, and when the communities will ask for our presence and our expertise to help them in a way that they have to decide which is the best one.
Marwan, do you want to add anything, or should I move to the next question?
Yes, somebody in the audience saying cannot hear. I wonder, but we can hear Amal, Guido. But anyways, I just want to add a small thing that in Gaza and in general, if you are bringing some internationally imported interventions, you'll find lots of resistance from the people in general whom you are bringing the interventions for. Therefore, any intervention that you're doing, it has to be tailored to the context and tailored to the religious beliefs and the culture of the community. And otherwise, if you bring some psychosocial interventions that are based on a Western perspective of pathology, sorry, yeah, I cannot say this word properly, pathology and individualistic symptoms, then you will have trouble in dealing with the population, and you will be accused of trying to divert the attention from the I guess the torture and the violence that's committed against the Palestinians in general.
I'm going to read the next question. If Western approaches to this topic using words like PTSD or resilience doesn't fit the Palestinian experience, how should we approach this topic instead?
So I think in general, we need to rethink and to question the usability of scientifically informed jargons, models, and ways to heal when we are talking about things that are related to the human being. So it's not just about Palestine in general. I think the mechanization of the human soul and the fact that we look at our psychological reactions, such as, in a way, consequences of a malfunctioning of the human machine, can be questionable itself. In the case of the Palestinian suffering, I think we have to exactly try to do what Marwan was mentioning now, the fact that we are working with a collectivistic society, we are working with a very religious society, we are working with population that used to transfer their skills of survival, their competencies to deal with unbearable conditions through storytelling, through stories, through oral tradition, the elderly that are transferring the sense of dispossession from a part, but even the pride to be person displaced from their original villages, grasping this language and being part of this community, organizing the resisting, the collective and the collective pushback to the colonizing power and the colonizer destruction. And this is a way, to rethink community-oriented interventions, participative and community-oriented intervention that for the very first time we'll look at the competencies of people to gather, to stay together, to reconnect, and to fight against oppressive powers as ways of psychological, individual, and collective healing.
Marwan, would you like to add anything?
Just if you want to heal the people, I think remove the occupation and remove the blockade and the siege. I think things will really, their mental health will become much better than what they are now.
Absolutely. And I think one of the comments in the chat from one of the guests that Guido or Marwan sent, Jerry Haynes, said, sadly, too many Israelis are not aware of what they're doing, and too many people in the US are not aware of what we are funding. I'm going to read the next question, and apologies, I'm having trouble reading some of the words or deciphering some of the words. It's like my writing. After food, medicine, healing, crayons, folded paper with thread, something drawn stories. Can drawn stories help the world see? That word I can't read. In addition to words, what a child is going through. I'm going to try to read it again. After food, medicine, healing, crayons, folded paper with thread, can drawn stories help the world see with images, I believe, in addition to words, what a child is going through. Sorry, I'm butchering your writing, whoever wrote this.
There is a very beautiful paper by, I think it's a US or Canadian scholar, his name is David Marshall, and he wrote very much about the kids living in the refugee camps, much more in the West Bank than in Gaza. But this paper is titled something like All Beautiful Things, and his perspective is looking at how kids were capable to transform space and places around them, the real difficult environment of a refugee camp. With a very small and beautiful things, they were capable to re-narrate their performative capability to struggle against this sense of oppression. So organizing some game, drawings, paintings, small murales, artworks, but just even performing their right of existence through games and play in the streets, they were capable to make these horrible spaces, the ones of a refugee camp, as the most beautiful things. I don't know if I answered the question.
John, at the moment, actually, in Gaza, we are conducting lots of such activities that you mentioned, drawings and dancing and some art activities. And in fact, I have lots of pictures of them and videos, and the kids are extremely happy despite all the circumstances that they are going through. So I think such things help the kids to heal, help the kids to live by and go on with their lives temporarily until something happens close by to them, or a death of a family member or neighbor or something happens, then we start the healing process again.
Yeah, the healing process, like you said earlier, doesn't start while you're suffering or while you're being injured. And if I may share another memory of being in Gaza in 2005, I was in Rafah in the south, and Marwan knows this much better than I. Up along the border with Egypt, there were entire communities in Rafah that had been literally bulldozed, entire communities, probably a mile and a half long, 300-400 yards wide, every building bulldozed, holes dug in the ground and buildings knocked into it. And at the edge of that destruction, I remember walking around during one of those breaks that happen all too often during the mural and seeing a bunch of kids playing soccer in the street with this really beat up ball, right? And in the middle of this destruction, 5-6-story buildings, all like sitting in a very irregular way, some of them completely demolished, streets covered with concrete destruction, and this group of like 4 or 5 kids playing soccer in the middle of it with what seemed like tremendous joy. And I'm walking around with my camera, and as most kids do, they'll run up to you and say, "Take a picture of me," or in Arabic, "Sawirni, sawirni." So I took pictures of them playing soccer and celebrating. But there was this weird little moment that flashes where that sense of joyful innocence reveals something that is revealed deeper wounds. And one of the kids asked me if I was a journalist. I said, "No, I'm not. I'm here working on a mural." And I can't remember what triggered it. And maybe it was something I questioned, but I really don't recall. But they started with one kid and then the small group. They went from innocent kids playing, and they were like 9 to 11 at the oldest. They went from innocent kids playing with a football to all of a sudden this little macho bravado kind of sense of like, we need, I forget the words, but something to the effect, we need vengeance for the indignities. And there's this deep-seated sense of pain from what they witnessed. They witnessed their parents humiliated. They witnessed their parents and cousins getting killed. They witnessed constant destruction. And I don't think they do it in a conscious way. And when I say bravado, it's not like, oh, I'm trying to be macho. It's kind of a natural response of wanting to react in a way against this persistent violence. How do we address that? How do we teach these children to not become the monster they want to destroy?
John, you precisely got the point. The Palestinian children are always navigating in these contradictory levels. From a part of the joy and the desire to play, to perform their childhood, and to develop in a proper way throughout this representation of life, which is play. And on the other side, they are continuously confronting with sorrow, pain, the parents killing, imprisonments, the lack of hope for the future, and so on. So they are continuously, in a way, into this polarized life. From a way they try to resist performing what normally the kids do all over the world, their games, their joyful idea of life and play. And on the other side, they have to confront with a miserable and difficult life. I think the point, and I think the Palestinian struggle is a must about it. A way not to reproduce this cycle of distraction, violence, and this cycle of cruelty is to continuously maintain a sense of memory, the memory of your ancestor, the good and warm stories the elderly were capable to tell to the kids about Haifa, about Jaffa, about Akka, about all of those territories that were dispossessed in 48. Not with the idea that we will be back with every necessary means, even to vindicate our condition, but just the fact that these stories are the stories that are shaping the kids' identity, the kids' blood, let me say. So if we will fight not to make the indigenous population in Palestine, such as the Aboriginal population here in Australia, or the First Nation in the US as a kind of archaeology of a new Western democratic country. But we will use the indigenous memory as the one that is informing this place and these spaces. The kids will not be necessarily go back to their countries using violence and retaliation. They just they will get back their stories, their tales, the things that are making their life beautiful and a hopeful life.
Marwan, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Guido and John. I think there is the concept of psychological numbness that is happening sometimes in the Palestinian context, or adaptation. You might think that they are adapting, but sometimes it could be a psychological numbness that they are not feeling, they don't know what to feel anymore, or they how they should react to your suffering or something. And because of the, I guess, so overcrowdedness, if I could say, overcrowdedness of the traumas, there is no time for them to feel the pain of other people. I personally had a minor injury when I was there, and I was, to be honest with you, very shy to go to the hospital and say I have a minor cut in my hand or something, while seeing the mass destruction of other people and the death or something. So if there is no blood, then you are really shy to present your problem. And if you have some mental health problem, in such circumstances now you cannot present them. If you have any trauma or whatever, you cannot, you just go home and deal with it on your own. So it's really difficult unless you have some blood showing, then people will deal with you. Otherwise, you should be normal. I remember meeting my cousin at the Rafah border when I was trying to leave Gaza. I tried to leave Gaza about 4 or 5 times. And then he told me, oh, hi, Marwan, I just want to let you know that my house was destroyed. It's like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And that was my reaction. That was the reaction that I had. So it was not any more of that. So I think it's really it's getting into us. Our psychological numbness is getting too much due to the traumas that we are accumulating one after another, one after another. And if you have a minor trauma or minor injury, it's considered nothing. You cannot be a wimp. You should not be complaining that something minor is happening, because look at the atrocities that are happening to other people. So that's the problem.
I'm waiting for questions from the audience, but I'd like to maybe ask another question, then we can wrap it up unless there's other questions or unless Guido and Marwan want to say more. Guido, you talked about the remarkable pattern of the many acts of micro kindness that you experience in Gaza. Micro kindness that is presented in the face of major aggression, continual major aggression. And that's something that I always experience in Palestine. I mean, you said it so clearly. You feel safe there because the community protects you, and they're kind and they're generous, and whatever little they have, they share with you as a guest. But within your clinical practices, can you talk a little bit about how this persistent aggression against the population manifests itself within the family, within the relationships between parents and children, within the relationships between spouses, within the relationship between brothers and sisters, and kind of the extended family? Now, I don't think that's something in the West we ever consider, how that impacts the nuclear family.
Yeah, I think one of the most brutal technologies of the occupation, the colonization, is exactly to fragment, destroy, to separate the social structures that most is making the Palestinian communities functions, which is the family. So the fact that systematically you target the men in a family, killing them, imprisoning them, making them jobless, so making them in the condition not to provide the basic opportunities for their families. The fact that you kill systematically children, so you systematically disrupt the possibility of a society of develop. The fact that you separate families through displacement, you demolish their homes. These technologies are clearly aimed at undermining the natural competencies of a society to recover from the colonizing burdens. So the consequences are at different levels. You see, of course, years after years, a society that is much more fragmented. You see an increased level of internal and domestic violence. You see then even reactions that are much more closer to individualistic societies. That's why, because even the Palestinian society, in a way, has been kind of westernized. Westernized in which ways? Different ways. We don't have time to talk about what I call a kind of sustainable colonization. So the aid system, the exploitation of models, the exploitation of diagnoses and whatever, these are all contributing in creating a traumatized society, a fragmentation. And then augmenting the risk that this very powerful protective factor, the family cohesion, will stop to serve the individual and collective wellness, well-being. So yeah, I think we can clearly perceive what this westernization and domination and expropriation of the collectivistic Palestinian identity is then affecting the Palestinian families, not just in a situation of severe violence and war such as the ones that we are experiencing, but even during the so-called peace, which is not a real peace in Gaza.
Marwan, would you like to say anything about?
I agree with Guido. Sorry, no, I think I cannot say anything after Guido in this regard. So,
seeing that there are no other questions from the audience, I want to thank Dr. Marwan Diab and Dr. Guido Veronese for not only being with us today, but for all of the work that they do in Palestine and other places and nations that are experiencing trauma. I think your work is critically important and sets the path towards down the road a process of justice to be followed by healing and then reconciliation between conflicting cultures. Thank you both so very much for your thoughtfulness and for your work you do and for joining us, taking the time to join us here in San Diego. I'm very grateful for your presence.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you everybody for having me today.
thank you, John, and the audience and everyone. Thanks to the University of San Diego. Thanks for the physical audience, for physical and the online audience as well.
And I just want to also, I neglected to acknowledge this in the beginning, that this teach-in is being organized by a group of faculty and alumni working under the title, the Gaza USD Coalition. And I feel remarkably privileged to be part of that coalition, and I feel empowered by their solidarity and their desire to learn and to seek justice in Palestine. I want to thank each and every member of this coalition. And thank you again, Guido, and thank you, Marwan, and my very best wishes to you all and your families.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks.